Welcome to What Not to Do. I'm Kyle Schmidt, and this is episode 33. I've got Don Herrmann with me. He's the founder and president of Herrmann Advantage Consulting, helping companies to perform, to produce, and to ultimately profit. He loves to fish, cook, and camp. He makes his own artisan bread and pasta from scratch. How awesome is that? Stay tuned. You're going to love this conversation. We'll be right back. All right, you want to know why? Well, I'll tell you why. My why is to use my presence and my prose to inspire you to go all in on you so that you live a legacy worth leaving. Again, to use my presence and my prose to inspire you to go all in on you so that you live a legacy worth leaving. And I want to inspire 1 billion people to live a legacy worth leaving by 2030. That's 10 years. That's 100 million people per year. So let's go. Join me in this mission to help equip the world for success and inspire 1 billion people to live a legacy worth leaving.
All right. So I am in Little Chute, Wisconsin. Yes, there's a town called Little Chute. It's not big, but they have an incredible gem of a coffee shop here called Seth's Coffee. And I am with the Don Herrmann, and I'm excited. We were just talking shop. He's got some fun tech issues he's going to be sorting out today, but such is life, right? In Don's world. But,
it is. Yes.
Don, man, I'm so excited. Thank you for sitting down with me.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This should be fun.
Yeah.
I'm marveling at your technology. So
well, actually, it is something to marvel at. I mean, it's a pretty lean setup, right?
Mm-hmm. It is.
I have a microphone. It's USB. It's going via lightning cable into my iPad, and then the world's going to get it. Mm-hmm. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
And maybe over the course of your career, you've seen how fast technology has been changing things, shaping things, and it's amazing how it's almost like the great equalizer. It just levels the playing field. So.
Absolutely.
Anyway, it was fun, but. So Don, this is the first time that we met. We recently connected. Was it maybe early this week?
I believe it was. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And some mutual connections, and it made sense. And I reached out to Don and asked if he'd be willing to share a story and lean into some failures, which is fun. And he said, "I've got many." So
yes, I do. Yes,
which is wonderful. Well, Don, I don't know you very well, and aside from who you'll share this with in your network, they probably don't know you very well. Most of the listeners, and so tell us a little about who you are. Where do you hail from? Where'd you grow up? Are you married? Do you have kids? What do you like to do outside of your day-to-day work? And then we'll get into what it is that you actually do. So.
Okay. Well, we'll start in the beginning because all good stories start there. And I promise this one will not start with Once Upon a Time. But I'm a native. I'm from the area here originally.
Awesome. Little Chute, that is?
Actually, I was born in Neenah, which is another community nearby.
Sure, yeah.
My family comes from Appleton, and if you go back historically, we're early settlers of Manitowoc who decided they wanted to live here instead.
Yeah.
My dad was a careerist in the Air Force, so while I was born here, I did not really grow up here.
Yeah.
So I grew up all over the United States. With my dad's service, he never went overseas where we could go. I think they had a hard time sending people to Vietnam, for example, that weren't, running around in the woods with a rifle. So. Yeah. And as a 10-year-old, that probably wouldn't have been a good thing anyway. But so I lived all over the United States, most of it outside of Wisconsin. Spent my summers here with my grandparents when they were alive when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So and then when I graduated from high school in Arizona, I joined the Army, and I had a career in the Army. And when I retired after 20 years of service, I literally started in a human resources career, and that evolved into the consulting business that I have now. Along the way, I picked up 3 sons, 3 grandkids. I'm not married anymore, but that's pretty much in a nutshell what Don is. Went to school in a couple of different places, 4 different high schools, 2 colleges. So it's been fun.
And do your kids and grandkids, are they somewhere nearby?
No, it's too cold up here for them.
They flew the coop.
So one lives in Northeast Ohio in the snow belt because it's too cold up here. One lives in Indianapolis, and then my middle son, he's in the Army. He's a career soldier in the Army, and right now they are in Georgia, and he's awaiting wherever he's going to go next.
Yeah,
so.
some great Yeah, great weather down in Georgia.
It is. I spent most of last year down there. So.
Yeah, well, and so then and the other two aren't too far away.
No, they're really
six,
it's
7, 8
driving
hours.
distance. Yeah,
Yeah.
So it's we see each other occasionally, getting ready for a big family gathering at Disney World the end of April. But
That'll be wonderful. Well, I was going to ask, outside of the day-to-day, work that you do consulting, what some of your hobbies and interests are, and I'm assuming maybe probably spending time catching up with the grandkids or when you can, or going to visit and that type of thing. And
absolutely. I mean, I mentioned this earlier. I'm a voracious reader, so that's how I tend to relax and help myself sleep. I enjoy camping, and I still tent camp. People tell me that I shouldn't be doing that. I should camp at Holiday Inn or something. But I love tent camping. I like to fish, and I'm a pretty darn good cook. So
there's a movement called glamping.
yes,
It's glamour camping.
yes,
And that's not Kyle's style. I'm a tent camper. That type of thing. You guys will see this in the picture, but Don and I both have very nice beards, which is great.
His is nicer.
No, it's good. It's great.
Yeah.
I love that. So, what kind of fishing do you like to do?
Mostly, pan fishing, bass,
Okay, yeah.
those kinds of nothing. I wanted to learn how to fly fish, and one of these days I'll get around to it. So
Right.
it's
What's the movie I'm thinking of? A river runs through it. Ever watch
that kind of fly fish. I'd love to do that.
Oh yeah, in that landscape and that scenery.
gosh, yes.
Come on! Just so beautiful. I think if we could, when I say we, my wife and I, we've got 3 little kiddos and a 4th on the way, which is fun.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. If we could close our eyes and wake up anywhere, it'd be like out in the mountains. And when we watched that movie, it was just like, oh my gosh, like
Yes.
is there a house there? Like, is
Yes.
there? It's just like
Yes.
wow, so peaceful and just beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Little Chute doesn't have quite as many mountains as Idaho does, but
No, and I moved back here. I was living in Denver before I moved back. So
okay, there you go.
I learned to appreciate the mountains very much.
yeah. And you cook.
Yes.
What do you like to cook?
Most anything. I for a while I was a amateur artisan bread baker,
Wow.
and I really enjoyed that.
Sourdough and stuff.
Everything. Yeah, I even made my own sourdough mix.
wife does it, and it's awesome.
When I decided I had to lose some weight, the carbs from the bread had to go away. So I let
the
that.
carbs.
Yeah, I let that go. I still make my own scratch pasta.
Yeah.
And I cook a lot of meals from scratch. I will call it American cuisine, even though there may be some ethnic flavors to it here and there.
Yeah.
If I had to specialize in an ethnic group, it would be Asian.
Cool.
I spent a bit of my life over there. So
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. So funny. My wife is an incredible cook as well. She loves sourdough. She makes her own starter.
Yeah.
And she also does pasta from scratch.
Ooh, yes. Tastes better.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So and she'll make I'm not the cook. I just eat, but like a pesto. So she'll make homemade noodles and then a really delicious pesto. And usually like on Saturday nights we try to do like a bigger family dinner. And she's been on a homemade pizza cook our kick.
Yeah.
But for a long time she would make her pasta.
Yeah.
And then usually once a year, sometime in the autumn, she'll make butternut squash ravioli. And so it's a little bit more of an intensive process, as you probably can imagine.
Yes, I make a butternut squash soup in the fall. That's
Okay.
pretty good. So,
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have to get the families together
There
and
you go.
have you over, and you can bring the
Yeah.
soup, and we'll have the
Yeah.
ravioli. That'd be awesome. Oh, that's great. So, okay. So you mentioned before you got into human resources, and you found yourself then in a position that you grew an expertise and understanding, and saw a real problem that you could be helping companies with, which gave birth to a consultancy, right?
So not exactly.
Okay, well, great. So then, so take us on that timeline
Sure.
of that evolution, and then help us to do understand what is it that you're doing today.
Okay.
Cool.
My HR background, while traditional, was also quite different.
Okay.
I worked a lot in the merger and acquisition world,
Got it.
which means sometimes I sat on that side of the table and sometimes I sat on this side of the table.
Yeah.
But with all of that, the last traditional job that I had, I was vice president of human resources for a national armored car ATM servicing company. And we had, in the roughly 3 and a little bit years that I was there, we went through 3 changes of ownership, 5 CEOs, and 7 chief financial officers. So it was always in turmoil. And when the new owners purchased the company, the writing was on the wall that they did not see HR in the same way that I had done. So I knew my days were numbered, and bigger than life, one day they disappeared. And it had been, as you might imagine, with all of that turnover, it had been a rather stressful job. Plus, we did a corporate relocation from Chicago to Denver in the middle of that. But
small things.
Yeah, just little things. And so that night was a Thursday, September the 17th, because important dates like that you don't forget. And September the 17th, we lost our job, and we was my entire department and myself. So we went out, we celebrated, and because we were glad. And the next morning, my phone rang, and it was somebody who used to work for me saying, "I saw you posted on Facebook last night that all you guys got let go. I need a consultant. Will you do it?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "Well, there's a catch." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "You have to be a real company, and we need you here Tuesday." And this was Friday. So I created my company with a little bit of input from some folks. Came up with this wonderful name, Herrmann Advantage Consulting, which in 2009, as I learned later, the acronym was, and still is, but the acronym was HACK. And in 2009, a hack was not what a hack is today. So I thank my very dear friend who informed me of that. But that's how I started my business, literally with a phone call and come do this. And my very first client in the whole wide world was a very well-known investment firm called TD Ameritrade. And I did their leadership development, succession planning, all of those things. Very traditional strategic HR type consulting assignment. After I started that, I picked up a couple of other clients again because of these personal relationships. But I ended up moving back up here to Wisconsin. I had family here, and family asked me to come back up here, so up here I came. And my way of doing human resources and the way that I was most accustomed at the time was not necessarily compatible with the way things were done around here. I would tell people I did HR, and they'd say, "Oh, you do benefits and payroll." No, I don't, because the staffing part was already taken care of by a very robust staffing industry up here. Yeah. So what happened was somewhere in the mix of all that, I got affiliated with a group of traditional business consultants. And we put ourselves together as a team that I did the workforce component of it. Well, my background with an MBA in operations and finance, plus I'm a green belt in Six Sigma, showed me that I could do the other parts too. Mm-hmm. So that kind of morphed into I was doing as much business consulting as I was HR consulting. Mm-hmm. Learned that, and I probably had always believed this, but learned that there's not a problem in any business that it's facing that the workforce does not solve. Yeah. So it helped me kind of evolve and morph that into other things. The bulk of the clients' size began to dwindle. No more big companies like TD Ameritrade or global multinationals like I was working with. We ended up with micro businesses, small businesses. And it was actually more enjoyable.
Why is that?
Less politics, more need, more openness, and appreciation. You sometimes got the impression with the much larger companies that they're doing this because, well, we feel like we have to, and we got to spend our money someplace.
That's good.
Yeah. The smaller businesses, we really need this. Yeah. You're adding value.
We're doing this for you, Don.
Yeah. No, not for me. But they really felt that they needed the expertise that was brought there. Right. It's not like they could afford it on a regular basis, right. Or they couldn't buy the talent.
But they were going to get more in use value from you guys.
Absolutely.
They were going to pay you. Yeah. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So we morphed into that. That little partnership of four kind of broke up, and I became independent again. And that really is what we're doing now. I'm still hack, but we're that's the royal we because it's just me. Yeah. But we're working with small businesses, generally under 30 employees. Some of them are between 50 and 100 with some of the things that I do. Yeah. And we approach the business issues as you've got an issue with performance, productivity, profitability, and I can help you through optimizing the value of your workforce or applying similar solutions. I can help you turn that around. How good do we do it? Well, quite well. I tell people, and it's true for the bulk of my clients, they get a 6 to 10 time return on investment for the fees they pay me to what they get. I say most because I do have clients where I might write an employee handbook. I might give instruction on conflict management. You don't really measure a return on investment from those, not in the traditional
more qualitative than quantitative.
Correct. Yeah. So, we do very well. The bulk of my work is now strictly in Wisconsin.
Awesome.
And it's not that I'm averse to traveling. I almost started one here not too long ago, but we're doing it virtually, so it doesn't you have to. But it's mostly all here in Northeast Wisconsin, what some people around here call the New North. So
well, and maybe that's something that's been really fun for me to learn more about. But I'd love to hear more of your perspective. I mean, because as you were sharing, I mean, there's so much opportunity for your business here in Northeastern Wisconsin.
Yes.
And in what was once very traditional industries, but again with technology and things coming together and businesses transform and new businesses rising up. I mean, what's happening in Northeastern Wisconsin? What's happening in the New North? What's going on with that?
Well, as far as an organization, I make it clear I'm not a part of the New North as an organization.
Yeah.
But what's happening around here is I think we're starting to see a shift in the industries that are here, or those legacy industries, the manufacturers, for example.
Paper.
They're changing how they do business. We're getting more into the technology arena. We're addressing those, and part of it is because of a skill shortage.
Yep.
You have to learn how to do more with less, and part of it is it's just an evolution.
Yeah.
The technology, for example, is coming in and taking over those old processes.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when a machinist machined metal, for example, much like you do wood turning with a lathe.
Right.
I mean, it's just you did it the same way, and it was a real skill and art. That's all done by computer now.
Now you press a button.
Yeah, these massive programmable CNC machines that do all that machining, and so that's an example of how we've changed the way we do things.
And not to knock the guy, but he's more or less, and I guess in plain terms, he's babysitting a computer.
In some respects, yes.
And that's a. Forgive me if you're listening and you find that insulting. That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
But it is to show how the rise of technology is changing opportunities within the workforce as a whole.
Correct.
Hey, this is Kyle. Well done on your decision today to be great. Those are my kiddos in the background. Hey, if you want more of this kind of content, find me on social media. We'll keep the conversation going. You can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, at StartWithWNTD. Again, at StartWithWNTD. We'll see you there.
And to your point, no, it's not knocking the skilled labor person,
Right?
Because they still have to have those skills in order to use this equipment.
Right.
But what is changing, and I read a very interesting study here not too long ago that said by 2030, half of the jobs that exist today will not exist then, and that 85% of the transactional things that all of us do on a daily basis, like you writing that note, for example, can be replaced by artificial intelligence or by computers. And people say, well, that's not true. I don't even see where it's happening. When's the last time you did a self-checkout at the grocery store? Yeah, there's an example right there that we all
don't go to the
experience.
grocery store.
Oh,
It
okay.
comes to us.
Okay. But,
And that's exactly your point. My wife we've got 3 under 3, 2 and 1 year old at home. She's pregnant, it's 2 weeks out from her due date. For her to go to the grocery store is a 3 to 4 hour event on a Friday morning, right? Or she could pay $5 to order through an app and have the groceries brought out to her car when she comes.
Correct.
So she never has to get out. Or she could pay $5 or $10 to have the groceries come to the house. So she just goes down the steps, opens the door, and picks them up.
Yes.
And when you understand the cost of time, and I'm saying, okay, love. So here it's taking you 3 hours to go to the grocery store and back with all 3.5 kids, on a Friday morning. How much is your time worth? How much, would it be worth it to you to pay $5 to have the groceries brought out to you or brought to you, right? It's just amazing. It's not expensive to do that from that perspective, Yeah, there's a cost involved, but
Correct.
The use value is much greater than the cash value.
Absolutely.
The technology is doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when they will start coming into my home and putting the things away in the cupboard, and maybe wipe off the countertops when they're done. we'll go there.
You missed a spot, right? Well, I think even some refrigerators offer an app to order through.
I have heard of that. I've not seen it, but I have heard of it.
Yeah, that's above our...
It's probably above my pay grade, as they say.
But yeah, so that's really cool. And it was kind of neat because the other couple guys that you were able to partner with for a while really gave you an opportunity because, like you said, you had the knowledge and the skills and the confidence, not just in the HR piece, but in the entire business spectrum, and it gave you a chance to really play there. And and now that you're back basically on your own as a hack, right? It's really, really cool to see that kind of evolution and the well-roundedness. So
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in that respect, the partnership was good because it gave me the confidence to use the skills that I had, and that had been using that hadn't thought that I was using. And that's something that I find very common even with my client companies, that the skills are there, they just haven't realized it yet.
Yes. That's awesome. I think, one of the things, I think it's so foundational. Like humans we're the common denominator, So like in all the talk about technology and AI is coming and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, those are real things, right? I don't think humans are going anywhere though, and I think they are our greatest.
Not unless
assets.
you believe in Skynet.
Right, exactly. Right. And so I love the work in the importance of realizing that hey, you're out of the three forms of capital, human, intellectual, and financial, humans are the most important. And without that, no one would exist. We wouldn't even be here. Like the technology wouldn't exist because the humans didn't create it, right? All that kind of stuff. And so, I love hearing folks that are in the business of seeing it develop, optimized, helping businesses to stay afloat in a day and age where it seems like the average age of businesses is declining fast because of technology. And developing a strategy for how you're going to adopt the latest things, and things move faster and are happening faster, and companies have to. They have to have a plan for that.
One of the things that I find is that, and you mentioned that you've got human capital and financial capital that need to be managed. And my personal opinion, and I use a quote by Jack Welch, who said that human capital management deserves the same attention as does financial capital management. But the point there is that oftentimes a business hasn't seen how human capital management can be managed in that way. And so the mantra of "I have never seen it, therefore it does not exist" pops into play. Most organizations manage their human capital, their workforce, as a cost. And yes, those are generally accepted accounting principles. That's what it says. But if you look at it as an investment, which is the approach that I try to take, the return is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And the ability not only to measure that, but to make that happen. It doesn't happen overnight, which sometimes is the challenge. They hire you because they want it to happen overnight. Yeah. But it can happen. It does happen. And one business at a time, you prove it time and time again. So
I love it. So we don't come from generational wealth or family business.
Me either.
My dad worked at a paper factory for 45 years. Recently retired, right? Great. So. But one thing that has intrigued me has been family businesses and family offices, and we hear the cliche of the first generation creates the wealth, the second generation manages it, and the third squanders it.
We're still working on the creation part of my family. So.
Exactly right. Yeah, that makes two of us. Yeah. So I've had fun reading just some books, kind of studying like how is that problem being solved? Like how do these ultra wealthy families keep this from happening, right? Because it seems like that would be the problem is why build the wealth just to destroy your lineage? It doesn't make any sense. And so in these books, the concepts that are being talked about are just that human capital. So like looking at your family as a business and your business as a family, your human capital, which are your people. You've got intellectual capital, which is your niche, your knowledge, your industry, whatever it is that you're doing from a business perspective. And then you have your financial capital, right? And seeing those things not in a linear fashion, but like in an infinite circular fashion that continue to feed one another. So you cultivate your human capital, and that's going to feed your intellectual capital, your niche, your knowledge, your industry, your business, which is going to yield, God willing, and the creek don't rise, financial capital.
Well, there's an expression I haven't heard in a while.
which will then, if you do it right, reinvest back into the human capital, and you get that flywheel turning like James Collins talks about. And so, but that's where it clicked for me is like thinking through some of the paradigms or frameworks like Collins has put out, and then family businesses. Like if that's true for a family business, it's true for an individual. It's true for me, right? I have human capital, I have intellectual capital, I have financial capital as an individual. And if it's true for me, the common denominator, the lowest fractal, right? It's true for a Fortune 500 company. And you actually mentioned it earlier when you talked about, helping companies with the performance and the production and the profit. It's those three exact things. Performance would correspond to the human. The production would correspond to the intellectual knowledge. Like, what is this company actually doing? And then, obviously, profit corresponds to the financial.
Yes.
And it seems like that's such a core piece that we actually short-circuit the entire process, that entire flywheel, that entire system, if we neglect the human capital side of things. And so, for instance, one thing that's talked about in the world of family businesses is, hey, every generation needs to be a creator. They need to be taught how to create the wealth. And every generation needs to be taught how to steward it. And every generation needs to be taught how to repeat that process with the next generation. And it seems to me like that's just business, right? Or that's an individual.
One would think, yes,
yeah,
yes.
Right, and so that whole tangent came from when you had mentioned how we sometimes just look at our people as a cost, right? And it's easy to view them as that because that's what we need on our accounting spreadsheets. The cookie cutter, this and that, but that's the quantitative aspect, but we're missing the qualitative aspect.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. It's to illustrate that with an example. I use a lot of process mapping on how I do things, and it helps us do lots of different things with a business.
Yeah.
But when you had mentioned earlier about the time factor and everything. And the process map, among other things, allows us to look at time and the time that it takes. Well, who is really in control of the time? More often than not, it's the people. Yes, they may be using tools, and that could be anything from a computer to a hammer, but there's still their impact on the time. So if you can look at the human aspect of it, help manage the time, and not to the ridiculous point of turning people into robots, right. but use the experts who are using the process, that machinist, that electrician, that kind of person. You can make that process more timely, more productive, and as a result, make the time use more efficient.
Yeah.
Which then either A, frees you up to do more work, and with a skilled labor shortage, that's a huge issue right now. Or B, make the organization more profitable. And the reality is, if you free them up to do more work, you're making the organization more profitable anyway.
Exactly.
So, and that's if you will, that's the secret sauce to what I do. So
and exactly as you said, assuming that you're freeing them up, right? Assuming that you've got the right people in the right seats on the bus, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Very, very cool. All right, so I love hearing you talk. I love hearing the excitement and the energy that comes through what you do in helping solve these problems for businesses. I'm curious just to hear more from you, like why. So you've built your career in this, and you've built your path. You're solving real problems in a time in Northeast Wisconsin that people, these things are needed from guys like you, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, why? Like, what's the greater purpose or aim behind Don waking up every morning, rolling out of bed, dreaming about fly fishing, and then get out and solving some problems?
Well, sometimes that rolling out of bed is a little challenging. The joints don't want to work, but I mean,
it depends if you're tent camping or not, right?
This is true. This is very true. But no, the biggest thing is that one of the things that was part of the transition from the very, very large businesses, those mega businesses, if you will, back to something a little more modest. It was part of that transition was the appreciation of what I could help them accomplish.
Yeah.
And so it's that partnership, that ability to go in there and do that. And then there's if I'm managing or working with multiple clients at the same time, it's being able to make that transition and getting that exciting variety in there. And that's an intellectual challenge, because I can go from this machine shop to this home builder to this restaurant, and the transitions, they're business is business, but the intricacies of the business are different because of the different industries, and making that transition is fun. It's challenging, and I like the challenge. But the overriding factor literally is the businesses that I work with are appreciative of the expertise that they're getting. And the fact that I'm not there to make them look bad, I'm not there to do anything but to teach them how to do it, so they can one day say, thank you very much, Don, it was great, and we can go our separate ways, but they know how to do things, and I can go on to something else. Yeah. They're not hiring me for life. I mean, we'll hear about customers for life, but that's not my mantra.
No.
So.
So. Awesome. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move into our main segment, and this is a lot of fun. taking a look back over the course of your career, a lot of experience, a lot of stories, a lot of war stories, maybe some scars, right? And I'm curious, you've had some great success, and you've helped a lot of people. You wouldn't have done that if you did everything wrong.
Right.
And so while this is a podcast where we enjoy leaning into failures and talking about those, I think it's first great to consider a few things that we did right. So for you, what are a few things that come to mind as far as over the course of your career, this was the right decision, or decisions that you made that were really, really helpful in contributing to your long-term success?
Okay. There's one thing that I did career-wise that I'm proud of, and I share it often.
Only one.
One that's it's huge, and it really is to me. But you know, and I got it. But no, I worked for a company that it was a healthcare company, and we provided healthcare in the home healthcare. We had a category of employee that were called sitter companions, and they did exactly what the job sounds like. They sat with the patient and were a companion. They did nothing else. The company made a tremendous amount of money off of this job classification. The problem was we had an over 250% turnover with this group. It didn't require a lot of education, so we generally hired those folks. The bulk of them in this company had not even completed high school, much less gone beyond the 8th grade. Some of them were functionally illiterate. I think you can begin to see where this is going.
Yeah.
In meeting with them, because we had a lot of nurses and physical therapists and pharmacists within the company, in meeting with this group of people, trying to understand why the turnover was there, we discovered they felt unappreciated. They didn't think the organization valued them. They had no place else to go because they didn't have the education. And there was the magic word. They didn't have the education. So I went to the president of the company, and we got together with the local literacy council, and we offered GED classes and basic literacy classes for those who needed it to our employees. The total investment was a ridiculously high sum. I think it was $5,000. But and we did some things that, you know, maybe were questionable. For example, we provided daycare. We basically started an unlicensed daycare because that category of employee couldn't afford it. We paid them while they went to class, or to the GED classes and everything. And to make a long story short, we reduced that over 250% turnover to less than 25% in the span of a year.
Wow.
And the president gave out the GED certificates when these employees graduated. A couple of them went on and became LPNs. They were incredibly grateful that somebody listened and somebody cared. The company got an award from the governor of the state where our headquarters was in. That was Tennessee. It just was it was a huge thing. It really was, because it did more than just make the business better. Yeah. And I've always valued that success.
Yeah.
So it's you know, so that's the big thing.
So what was the right decision there? Was it just identifying what the real opportunity was?
Well, the right decision was not only that, but it would have been very easy to have said, so what?
Yeah.
We just go find another one.
Yeah.
and in fact, there were some on the executive team that said, why don't we just do that? Why do we want to put this time and effort into it?
Yeah.
You know, it's and I don't fault people who bring those kinds of things up, because I think you have to look at that perspective as well.
Sure.
But that's you know, the right decision was we did the right thing. We valued these employees at that end of the economic and educational scale just as much as we did those pharmacists with doctorate level degrees, or those people with graduate level degrees. We valued them the same. And the reality was we actually made more money off of those less educated employees than we did off the higher educated employees.
Right.
So
that's really interesting. As much as you can quantify, right? But it's interesting. I mean, the other qualitative aspects could be maybe the patients that they were sitting with were more impacted in a positive way.
In some respects, yes.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times these were either the elderly, or in a couple of cases, we did have some rather well-known country western stars that wanted their own nurse, so they dress them up in a nurse uniform and tell everybody that's who they were. Yeah. And they weren't, of course. But I mean, it's you know, but there was true story. there really was, both to the patient, as we called them then. I think healthcare refers to them all as customers now, but in those days they were the patient, and they received a tremendous amount of value. Yeah. And it was harming our brand, if you will, to put it in more current terms, because if we lost someone, then we'd had to get a new sitter companion into a home and go through the assimilation, the introductions, and all those. And what if they weren't compatible? What if, no, that's not whoever the previous person was, I want them back. And there was some cases, these were, in most instances, very seriously ill folks. They could have had dementia or Alzheimer's. Making those transitions were challenging.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, and only if you think the show deserves it, would you go over to Apple Podcasts and give us an honest, thoughtful 5-star review? This will really help us in our mission to equip the world for success.
Yeah, that's one thing I find phenomenal in life. So going back to you're saying about how some of the folks in the room were considering the human cost, the cost of the human capital. Hey, maybe it's just better to have the 250% turnover, right? Maybe it's better from a cash flow perspective or whatever it might be, right? But that's it. That's the funny thing about life is because it's not just quantitative, it's also qualitative. It's really, really hard to trace the web of ROI. We don't know how one thing we do over here will necessarily come back to impact us over here. And there's only so much math that we can do, and then there's mystery. And I love decisions like that because it's like, yes, like in one sense you're saying we reduce the turnover, significantly, 250 to 25, less than 25%.
Yeah.
It technically costs us more, but we, in a sense, had a gut feeling that this was the right thing. We're seeing other impact, and we're while we can't necessarily measure it, and we couldn't give you the the spreadsheets to show it. We think it's actually helping us in the long run better.
Right.
That's amazing, and that's it takes a high level of. It seems to me like intuition. When you're in those rooms making those decisions, when the pure math, just one side of the the table, would want to really pull you that way. Do you have any, thoughts on that or comments on that or?
Well, it's in most instances, I'm one of those people that believes all people are good, and I could give you some examples of where they're not, but but I'm one of those, and I think when all was said and done, the CEO of the business would have never been open to even exploring the why, if he wasn't concerned about this group of employees. So in that respect, we had we're going to do the right thing attitude. The economics of the situation, we were able to demonstrate much of that. And some of the numbers to this day, I still remember, we were charging $55 an hour for this service. We were paying the employee around $8 an hour. So everything else in that was basically our gross profit. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Sure, you could say, well, time and a half if you had to pay somebody overtime, but they really couldn't handle more than one person at a time. So overtime was never an issue. It was an all or none issue with the revenue. So that was the value. We were able to use that to calculate the value. And while I don't remember the exact return, I know it more than covered the cost of doing this.
Yeah.
And so it made it one of those proverbial no-brainers.
Yeah.
And
cool.
Well, I've seen some no-brainers that should have stayed that way.
That's awesome. Yeah. So then, really, like even underneath in that story, one of the things that seems like that you've done right is you've viewed humans as humans, people as people, and you come with that from a perspective where yes, cost matters. Yes, there's a cost involved. We're not going to ignore that because that would be foolish. But it's not all about cost.
Correct.
And that's part of your decision making throughout your career, which has helped to make really valuable decisions in the best interest for people. That has come back to really be impactful for companies.
Right.
Which is really cool. Yeah, I love it. We need more of that in our day and age. It seems like we can have conversations about data analytics. For instance, here's a resume. You turn in a resume and it gets filtered through a computer system that doesn't have the right keywords and it's out the door, right?
Right.
And yet you don't have the flesh and blood, boiling in front of you. And there's interesting ways in which, what's the old saying? People are numbers don't lie, people do, right? And there's ways that we can spin the data to tell it whatever we want to. But when you don't forsake the data, but you also you keep the data and the DNA, like the numbers and the person, you get a more rounded story. And it's in our day and age of technology and data analytics, it's important not to let that just assume it's a full representation of the person.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think I've been fortunate because the data analytics piece was something that I learned early career.
Yeah.
And was able to continue at that. And even today within the HR field anyway, even today, it's not that common. It's if anything, I saved you money by not doing something. and it's that's not real savings. And on the rare opportunity, for example, you reduce the cost per hire, for example.
Yeah.
That's money that can be used elsewhere. It doesn't impact your bottom line. It's not part of your profit. It's part of your cost. And so therefore, what's the real value?
Yeah,
not
but
really there.
Yeah, let's say, well, you know, I passed on the guy who wanted $100,000 a year and got the guy that was 50.
Correct.
Well, maybe
And
the
that's
guy
a good example.
Well, maybe the guy that was $100,000 a year would have produced twice as much for the company and increased the bottom line, whereas the 50 was just filling a job, right?
You're right.
And it's a very interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, let's flip it. As you're looking back, he's trying.
No, I'm laughing because I'm ready to tell you the story. So
he just pulled out this thick notebook, detailed notes. Yeah, so you're human. You know, you bleed the same as I, and I'm going to roll the dice and say you probably have some failures in life, and what ones away, ones you wish you had back, right? The ones that got away, if you will, and. So, 1, 2, or 3 things, you know, obviously not looking for trade secrets, keep the skeletons in the closet. Yeah. There's a podcast for that, but over the course of your career, what are a few that come to mind that you think would be really helpful?
Well, the one that comes to mind, and it's actually a humorous story after the fact, is
humor me.
Yes, I work for a hospital in Northeast Ohio. And we decided, we had learned, let me back up, we had learned that we had a very large Hispanic-speaking population in the community. And that the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which was the local major newspaper, had done a study and said the only thing they trusted more than us was the church. The problem was we had hardly any Hispanic employees in our organization. So what's the best way to reach out to Hispanic employees? You create a Hispanic job application process, which is exactly what we did. And bigger than life, it worked perfect. They started applying and everything, and then my recruiters came to me one day and they said, Don, we don't know how to read Spanish. We can't even speak it. Don didn't know how to do that either. We had nobody who could speak Spanish or read it. What do we do now? And it was rather embarrassing because we ended up getting somebody on staff that could do that. We used a school teacher from the local high school for a while. Sure. But the lesson that I learned there is the best of intentions, and even when you know it's the right thing to do, you need to think it through a little bit. And it wasn't that we were unfamiliar with dealing with non-English speaking populations. We had a very large Russian speaking population. I mean, we shouldn't be talking about Russian speakers right now, but we had a very large Russian speaking population, and we had documents that were in Russian. But we were not really addressing the needs of the Hispanic community. So the organization was quite open to it, and we made it happen. And I'll take responsibility. It was my project. We did not think it all the way through, and so that's what happened there. Another one was probably a little more painful, and I was surprised I wasn't fired for it. So.
Well, let's double click on the first one. So the idea of I'm not thinking all the way through it. It's easy. You had a great idea, a great strategy. There's a problem, and you found a solution. And so then the idea, you know, it seems to me like maybe the idea is not the same as the plan, right? It's like, hey, we got this great idea. Oh, hey, we can just do this. Great. And you're saying, you know, like we didn't really think it through all the way in.
Correct.
We didn't know that we had all the necessary, gaps filled, so to speak, to be able to execute on the idea or even on the plan. And so, I mean, I guess in a don't do this type of manner, like, would you say, like, don't discount due diligence, or like, how would you phrase it in a way of like, hey, don't do this?
I would say that the step that should have been done is somebody should have played devil's advocate. And it wasn't that I didn't know that. You know, I've been taught to do that in every decision process. For whatever reason, we got wrapped up in the excitement of, look what we're doing. Look how advanced and progressive and all those other nice words we are. And I let that interfere with the team doing the other pieces that needed to be done to have potentially precluded that, because we would have gone through the same process to hire somebody that was a fluent speaker and reader in the language. We would have done that. But the fact that we had to wait until we were now in an embarrassing situation where we literally had hundreds of applications and we didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
So.
And had you had a devil's advocate, that's great actually. So I just wrote down, don't be an angel.
Right.
In a sense. There's a way in which we can be overly hopeful, overly optimistic, and that's a great thing. But what you're saying is that needs to be balanced out with someone needs to say, okay, like let's figure out why this won't work.
Correct.
Right? Because then when you have the devil's advocate, and you really just set it on the table just to be hacked away, right? You're gonna be able to find all the weaknesses and make sure that you've got a great play.
It reminds me of a saying that I had from an old boss many years ago. who said that if everybody's thinking the same thing, nobody's thinking. And we got all wrapped up into thinking the same thing, and we didn't think.
Yeah. If everybody is thinking the same thing,
Nobody's thinking.
That's great. All right, so you said you had a second failure.
I did.
One of two.
I was working for an organization in Nebraska. We were rather large, and the chief financial officer and I got together and looked at some historic data and decided that we could save money for the organization by self-funding our workers' compensation insurance.
Okay.
We had never had a claim that went above $20,000, and that's not the exact number, but it was really close to that. Made perfect sense on paper. So we took it to the executive team. They said, makes perfect sense, do it. So we did it. It wasn't a month. And it was ugly. We had an employee, got in an automobile accident, fell into the drainage ditch for a farm field, and picked up every infection known to man.
What a coincidence.
Oh, yes. And that claim exceeded $1 million.
Oh, my God.
And CFO and I got called into the CEO's office, and before we went in, it was kind of like Dorothy and everybody going in to see the wizard. It was like, goodbye, guys. It was nice knowing you. And we just knew it, and we just knew we were going to get fired. And so it's fortunately he said, you really did make the right decision based on the data that you had. It was unfortunate. The lesson that I learned there was two parts. One was mistakes happen even when you do everything that you have to do. And the other one is that sometimes a little bit of compassion is really a nice thing to do. Because I couldn't have batted an eye if he fired us, because at that point, I would have fired me. $1 million loss is significant. I don't care how big of a business you are. Yeah. And that's the way I look at it. He did not. And, so it's... Of course, he got on a plane a month later and flew to Scotland to go play golf at St. Andrews for a month. But, so I guess maybe it didn't really mean a lot to him.
Yeah, you had to let out some steam somehow,
But no, in all seriousness, those two lessons were very valuable to me, that sometimes mistakes happen.
Same again.
Yeah.
The two, or are you saying those two failures?
Oh, yeah, those two failures. The one where we did the Spanish language piece, and the other one where we did the workers' compensation change, and the two lessons were, one, even when you go through, dot all the I's and cross the T's, bad things can happen. And the other piece of that was, sometimes bad things happen, and it doesn't mean that you've got to make the problem go away, if you will.
Yeah. It's
that old. Somebody told me it was a Russian proverb that I've got a problem with this man, so if I make the man go away, there's no problem. I don't know that it's a Russian proverb or not, but it's the same analogy.
It sums up every spy movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, basically, and that's probably where I picked it up when it was.
So you could do all the they kind of build into the right, because that first one, don't be an angel, have a devil's advocate, work through it all, and you could do that perfectly, and you could have just beat this thing to death, and you didn't find any weak spots. You shored everything up, and suddenly boom, look,
right,
and there's something that no one thought of, no one saw, something that was just out of your control, right? So now what? So bad things happen. So what's the takeaway there? Like, what's the don't do this that's there? How would you phrase it? When that happens, don't do it.
I think the takeaway there is really that sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, and you can't let consequences or potential consequences get into the way. This made perfect sense, and to my knowledge, they've never had another incident like this since. This was an anomaly to beat all anomalies. It just happened, and sometimes you just have to accept that no matter what you do and you do everything right, the takeaway is that sometimes things do go wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. And when that happens, you're saying you can't beat yourself up?
Correct.
There's the old saying, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. In these situations, you did the due diligence, you did everything you possibly could. Boom, you couldn't have foreseen it, you couldn't have controlled it. You didn't know literally a month later some guy was going to contract just a worst case scenario.
Absolutely.
And you guys had 20,000 in coverage and his was over $1 million, right? Yeah. What are you going to do?
Yeah. And in both of these instances, these were lessons that I learned that assisted me with similar or related issues later in life. You know, when in my last traditional job, we had two branches of operation that no one spoke English in either one of those. Well, the ability to navigate that in one helped prevent that from happening without breaking the law, but two, to provide the level of service that you needed to do it. I knew enough about how to go about doing that would help us with that. And then the other piece, we were constantly changing organization, that money was going here, there, and everywhere. And understanding that sometimes you make an investment in something that isn't going to work out when all of the projections are there, that you don't jump on the bandwagon of the people that say, burn them, hang them burn them at the stake, hang them, whatever. Just
heretic.
Yes. I caught myself in the middle because I remember that Facebook meme. Oh, she misspelled something on Facebook. Burn her.
So that second lesson from the second story you mentioned was, compassion goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And playing off that when things happen outside of your control, your CEO exercised quite a bit of compassion.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So maybe talk about that, because it seems like he could have been right to be angry,
mm-hmm.
right? Because he delegates responsibility.
Well, he didn't congratulate us, I'll tell you that.
Wasn't a pay raise. He didn't take you to Scotland with him, right? But so maybe what's the lesson there, as far as like, is it something like don't discount compassion, or don't be a jerk, or what's the don't do this?
Well,
from there?
To the compassion point, it's very easy in your head to make a black and white decision.
Yeah.
And many of us will do it.
Yeah.
That person was wrong, fire them.
Yeah.
And I think an astute leader, which Chuck was, he was a very astute leader. He looked at the data. The data says we had a major screw up. But he looked at the process that went into how all of that happened. We weren't malicious. We weren't negligent. We weren't incompetent.
Yeah.
We did everything as everyone had been professionally trained, educated, and experienced to do.
Yeah.
And it just happened to turn out the way it did, with an unforeseen and no way you could predict it circumstance. So I think he took all that into consideration, and that was that. There were people on the board of directors that wanted us gone, and again, I wouldn't have blamed them. I mean, it's
messing with profitability and all that kind of stuff. And
but he went to bat for us, and that's the way it was. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's good.
To me, that's real leadership, is understanding what your people do. So.
All right, I want to know, who's next? Who do you want to hear on what not to do? Which entrepreneur, which leader, which public figure in your network do you want to hear on the show? Maybe it's you. Maybe you need to be here. So let's connect me with whomever, and we'll sit down for coffee, a beer, or even a cigar, and together equip the world for success.
Yeah, so it's easy for those situations when you have consequences that happen outside of your control.
Mm-hmm.
They just like any stressful situation, the adrenaline bumps up, your vision goes blurry,
mm-hmm.
and it's easy to lose sight of compassion, right?
Right.
It's actually pretty interesting to think through how the CEO handled it. He didn't lose sight. He kept his sight. He didn't lose sight of the importance of compassion. He was able to objectively just look back through things, see that you guys did your due diligence,
right? And
he was able to exercise just compassion, right?
Correct.
Human mistakes, right? It is what it is, and ultimately he had signed off on it, right?
Right.
And so it is.
So he accepted his role in the process too. He could have very easily distanced himself from it, and
which is great. And that's another lesson too. Don't trick the responsibility, right? Like
Correct.
Wherever you fall in the pecking order or the hierarchy, you have certain responsibilities that are assigned to you, and it's, while it might not have been your particular fault, for him it all rolls up to him anyway. It falls on his shoulders, so he has to take responsibility for it.
Absolutely,
which is different than accepting fault for the situation. That's all. It's really, really helpful. So imagine young Don was sitting here at the table with us, and he had the beard on and the glasses, and just a little bit younger. Just came back from a camping trip, fishing, and good haul of bass, right? Or pan. What would you tell him? Assuming you wanted him to avoid a few of the failures that you just mentioned to us, what would you might tell him to do that he could do differently to not make these same mistakes?
I think one of the big things, and I'm going to talk primarily about the consulting business that I have now. I think one of the big things is at my first opportunity, I should have stepped back and begun to make a plan on how I was going to make this work, and if this is what I wanted to do. I did not do that until very late. So after the first 2 years-ish, the business performance began to decline significantly because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do some of the things I needed to do. Right. Yeah. All of my initial clients were referrals. I didn't have to sell anybody. It was, hey, Don, can you do this for us? Yes. Okay, send me a contract. It was just like that. So I didn't have to do any of that business preparation or value proposition preparation, any of those things. And that really caused a lack of focus, because when your revenues are declining, one of the first things you do is, I'm going to run out here and I'm going to make revenue any way I can. So
start knocking on doors.
Exactly. And what it did was it caused not only a lack of focus with my business, but it obscured the brand of my business to people who didn't really know what I did, or they didn't understand what I did, because I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. Instead of, no, I don't do that, let me send you to somebody who can, but I do this. And I should have stuck along those lines. So it's I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned out of this. Part of what I do, particularly when I mentor some of the startups around here, is I help them establish that plan. And we're not talking about in-depth financial projections or things. Just a very simple, what do you do, why do you do it, who are your customers, and how are you going to get there? And just a very simple mapping of that so that they don't have the experiences that I did with those dry, lean years.
So you're saying, and I think we mentioned this earlier, but an idea is not a plan.
Correct.
And you had an idea, and you had an idea of how you were going to solve businesses or solve problems for businesses, but it still wasn't a plan.
Right.
And it made you money for a little bit, but eventually that wave kind of rode out, and you're saying, so what is my plan? And it also seems like having the plan actually allows you to scale.
It does.
Can you talk about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing is that what did I do? And I had my first client that I was doing leader development, succession planning. I had another one that I was helping them with strategic plan, workforce plan, which dealt with the entire workforce, and some process management as they utilize that workforce. And the other client was just basically I was an interim HR leader for the organization. I kind of oversaw everything. So related, but incredibly different. And when I started, they started to age out of the process, if you will. In other words, we'd done all we could for them. It was time to move on. What did I want to do next? How was I going to get there? I had no clue. And I didn't even know how to go about doing it. And so, much less even who to ask. So had I had at least some semblance of a plan, because an idea is you're right, an idea is not a plan, and it's not a plan until you write it down. Yeah. And it's not a viable plan, and it's not a viable plan until you execute it. So I mean, you've got to do those things. And so I had none of that. All I had was the idea. I'm a strategic HR guy. I can do that. And it was not good. So the development of that plan was critical, and in my case, that's how, in part, I made the transition to smaller businesses from the larger ones. Some of it was personal desire, some of it was reality, and then understanding what they looked for. An example. It's a real simple example, but I was accustomed to dealing with millions of dollars of budgets, and I'm talking like 8, 9, in a couple of cases, 10-figure. Millions, which becomes $1 billion, I know. But you walk into a $5 or $6 million company and you say, nothing to spend $1 million, and they look at you like, what the heck is wrong with you? That's 20% of my revenue. You can't do that to me. And they're right. So making that mental transition was also a part of this plan. Yeah. And that, I think, was probably more challenging than not. And I still occasionally have little flashbacks of that, if you will, or... Yeah. I don't know what their problem is. Why don't they spend $150,000 on this? Well, that's probably because they're only making $3 million.
Don't you know what Walmart does? Yeah,
right. And those kinds of things. So it's but having that plan where you, among other things, define what you're going to do and who you're going to do it for, is even at a bare minimum, that's the most crucial right there. Yeah. And not knowing that, because they didn't, not knowing that created some pretty significant challenges for them.
Yeah. A couple things you mentioned there I think are really important. the one about it's not a 1-to-1 ratio for companies, but so there's the age-old distinction between principles and methods. You know, principles are transcendent, methods are they vary. And an example would be if we're method focused. Oh, you know, Walmart spent $1 million here, so therefore the mom and pop shop should spend $1 million here.
Correct.
No, but what's the principle? Walmart really invested in this form of distribution or this form of marketing, whatever it is. So are you guys prioritizing that? So the principle is transcendent and carrying over, and then we can figure out how that looks. And so if you're able to pull those levers, I think that's really important, and it's something that we can do in all of life. Is just to not to keep a careful distinction between principles and methods. The principles are the transcendent, abiding things, but depending on the situation, they could be applied differently.
Correct.
And then the other one about, when you have the idea and then you have a plan, and then you actually write down the plan, and then you actually execute the plan. But when you get that kind of clarity, you know who your ideal customer is, right? So if you're just kind of taking any old referral, that's fine,
right?
And you might be able to solve problems, but I mean, if you're solving 100 different types of problems, you're spread a mile wide and an inch deep. Are you really making the kind of impact you could? As far as if you narrow and say, like, this is my ideal customer, this is my sweet spot. It's a $1 to $5 million local business that whatever that you sketch it out, and you get clear on that and who it is that you actually are serving and the problems you're solving for them. Then you find people exactly like that. And so do you think that's important, or how would you talk about that? But it seems like those are two things, principles and methods, distinguishing between the two, and then also the importance of really knowing who it is that you're serving, so you can find more of those people.
You know, to the principles and methods, I generally will use the phrase basic concepts or general concepts.
Okay.
To me, it's a synonym in this case. But I do that for a reason. Everything that I do with a business is custom and unique to that business. I will not go into a company and use the same process, meaning the full process. System is a better word here. The full system within a company that I do in another one. It will be unique to that. But the concept that I use to get there is still the same thing. We go through the same steps, but they're amended or manipulated to where they're unique to the business. What I would do in a machine shop would be different than what I would do in a restaurant, for example. And when I say that would be the product or the system. Everybody likes the word system. Do you have a system that you use? No. But so it would be, the system would be different. But how we created the system, that's the piece that's consistent. That's the concept.
Yeah, those basic concepts that help us to construct the system.
Correct.
Yeah, that's actually good because the system is what could vary. The system is what methodologically could vary.
Right. Yeah. And there's also and not every business that I meet with has done nothing with any of this. Many of them have tried, so they've got components already in place. Now we have to help them bring them together. So my coming in and saying, we're just going to scrap that, we're going to do it all over again, that's number one, it's money grabbing on my part, and number two, it's discounting the effort, the sincere effort that they put into it. Goes back to those lessons we learned. And so let's figure out what you did here, what works and what doesn't work, and use those things, and then try to build off of that.
So then sweet spot for who it is that you're serving, right? The importance of, because it seems to like, so you're familiar with the Pareto principle or 80-20 rule. 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, or I think how it was initially formulated was 80% of your outputs come from 20% of your inputs.
Correct.
However you want to phrase it, and there's different ways that you can understand how that pulls various levers in various situations and organizations. But in this case, when you look at that curve, that Pareto curve on a graph, and you see that 20% is where it really spikes, right? Who are those 20% of customers that they probably look similar, and they probably have similar problems, but yet we're spending all of our time with these other 80 customers that we really don't profit from. Maybe we don't have that great job of solving their problem, or maybe we do. But what if we just double down on these 20 customers, that type of thing, and a company starts to get really, really clear with who it is that they actually serve.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's super important trying to do that the best you can ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me like there'd be a bit of a process of iteration in figuring out who that is.
Correct.
But do you want to talk on that at all? Or
Sure. I mean,
the
the key here is that everybody has a quote unquote problem.
Yeah.
And I look at it as what's the root problem. And I'll give you an example. We're not making enough money, therefore we have to sell more. and I hear that probably 90% of the time. So Don, how can you help us improve our sales?
Yep.
Well, come to find out, as we do this, I use a process called the 5 whys. It's a 6 Sigma technique, and you just keep asking. You sound like a 2-year-old. You probably know all about that.
Or Socrates, right?
Yes. Why? And what you're doing is you're trying to get to the root cause. What is really creating it? That's the problem we're trying to solve. Yeah. Of that roughly 90% that tell me we need to increase our sales, I would say less than half of those really have a sales problem. So that is just an example. But my approach is, let's find out what your real problem is.
Yeah.
And then we'll look at what have you done. And what worked, what didn't work, and from that then we can determine, which is a whole lot different than the way I started this business. We can then determine whether or not I can help you. And if I can't help you, I've got a strong enough network. I can send you to somebody who can.
Yeah.
And
you help them in
yes,
that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. And it seems like that's so funny. We're not making enough, so we got to sell more. Mm-hmm. And it comes back to that it seems just by that statement and that caricature. Mm-hmm. An overemphasis on the quantitative.
Right. Yeah. And a classic example was a client that I had one time. He was, for every dollar he was making, it was costing him $1.50. Wow.
I could stay in business very long.
No. And it took a while to get them to understand that. But the ability to be able to tell him that comes from my ability to be able to measure that. I'm not an accountant. I don't play one on TV, and I wouldn't be one anyway. But I can do that. I can figure those things out from what their expenses are.
Yeah.
And it's once you get past that point, you begin to know where the pain points are, because you can measure them in dollars and cents. Because if all I'm saying is I need to sell more and you can't tell me any more than that, then it's not enough pain for you.
Yeah.
But if we can put it down into dollars and cents, or we can put it down to what specific about it is keeping you awake at night, or causing you stress in your personal relationships, or those kind of giving you ulcers, then we can really begin to quantify that pain and what we need to do, and it gives us that sense of urgency that we need.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing that I require with my clients is that number one, they have to want help. Number two, they have to be willing to change how they're doing things. And the last piece is they want to be better than what they are. Yeah. They have to have those 3 pieces. And that may sound to some people as being very cliche or salesy, but it's not.
It's cliche because it's true.
I have found businesses that were perfectly content the way things are. Don't tell me to change, because I've always done it this way and I'm happy with it. And anything else that you can say that sounds like that.
Yeah.
And number one, they probably never hire me anyway. But equally important is we're just not a good fit.
Right. Exactly right. They have to, in your case, they have to be open to wanting to change.
Correct.
Wanting to be shown some of the weaknesses, right? Mm-hmm. That people don't love to look, just like this podcast, people don't love to look in the failures. Mm-hmm. We live in a day and age where we love to Photoshop our failures, right? We like to cook the books or whatever it is. We want to hide that stuff under the rug. And no, that's great.
Yeah. And that commitment really has to be there to do that. You said something in one of your posts on LinkedIn that I saw about burning the ships.
Yeah.
And first of all, I went, wow, I was impressed, because there aren't many people that will use that metaphor. or idiom, whichever one it is. But regardless, I mean, that's commitment. I mean, you burn the ships on the beach. Yeah. There's no retreat. You have no choice but to succeed.
Yeah. So I mean, the story was for our listeners, if you haven't heard of it, going to battle, and I think it was over in. Do you recall the war?
Probably ancient Greece. It's probably one of the Greek or Roman things. I don't know.
Something, but basically they roll up, and the captain ordered that the ships be burnt.
The Central America is one of the Spanish conquistadors or something. When they went there, that's what it was. Yes.
Okay.
Pizarro or Cortez, one of those guys. Yes.
Makes sense. I like cigars, so probably why it stick. Yeah. But the reason he did that was because he said now our only chance of survival is winning. And I think there's something that happens psychologically within us that we can't. It's really hard to quantify from a quality perspective. They had to win or they were going to die. There wasn't a plan B. There wasn't an opportunity to say, well, hey, if things go south, we can just escape.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you take the principle, not the method, because how many of us have ships that we're going to go burn, and how many of us are fighting, blood battles. But the idea of going all in on something to not give ourselves a different, an exit plan that we love to do because we love to hedge our bets and mitigate risk and calculate, which can be important. But not if it actually short circuits the process of victory all across, across the board. There are those different levers that, from a qualitative perspective, that actually help to spur on human action and productivity more than just a quantitative thing. It's interesting. It's kind of funny because coming back to the cost of sale, if your sale costs you more than the sale itself, if the cost of sale is more than the sale itself, you actually need to sell less.
Well, it is one of my main goals to give you more in use value than what I take from you in cash value. And so, man, I love that this podcast is for free. And I really hope that you are finding just incredible value. Who knows, maybe in one of these episodes, you'll take an idea that will be worth $1 million to you. And that's so awesome. If you believe in this and what we're doing here and you'd like to give, you can go to patreon.com/whatnotttodo and you can give according to your heart's desire. But seriously, every little bit helps in our mission to equip the world for success. Thank you so much.
Correct. You know what I'm saying? And that goes back to, if out of 100 customers, if 20 of them are like the sweet spot, and you're actually profitable on the sales and all that kind of stuff, but you have 80 customers that you're prospecting into and going after and trying to help, and it's costing you more just to try to do less business with them. That's a liability.
Right.
And you'd be better off getting rid of the 80 customers and doubling down on the 20 and trying to find more like them.
Right.
It's a sweet spot. The problems you solve are relevant. It's profitable for you. If it's profitable for you as a business, it's likely it's really helping the customers that you're solving, helping them to be profitable. So there's a good feedback loop there that would be great. Then obviously you're doing better work. You are going to get better referrals. Reputation huge in that space, and that's important.
Yes.
It's amazing. You don't have to name names, but how common is it that you see a cost of sale being more than the sale itself?
Not that common.
Extreme? Okay.
Especially in the extreme that I had.
Yeah.
But I will frequently find that they're not really aware that their sales are costing them more than they can.
Interesting. Yeah.
And sometimes it's, you had used the expression earlier, they didn't have the right people.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the processes are really, really flawed. Yeah. Sometimes it's the wrong customers. And, it's a combination, any one of those. But there rarely are they as efficient in the processes as they can be without getting into perfection. And perfection is not going to happen. There's no such using it as a goal. But you can be more efficient than what you are. And that's usually where we find the issues.
Unless you're cooking pasta. Then there is a...
Yeah, because if you're not perfect in that, it doesn't work. That's a true story.
Yeah, right. So, well, cool. So talking about this, Don. We are all shaped inescapably so through our life. The way that I often think of it is it's like a rose. The beauty, the promise, the capacity of that rose was always wrapped up in the seed, right? It falls on blacktop, not going anywhere. You plant it in a garden, it's going to grow, but contingent on the right ratio of sun and rain, right? The right proportions, and the weed whacker, the lawnmower staying away from it, right? That type of thing, and or whatever animals might try to nibble at it, etc. And I think human life is quite a bit like that. That there's so much potential, capacity, promise within us from the time that we're born, but environment really can help with that, help to draw it out, or to help squash it. And people play a big part in that environment. And so I'm curious for you, throughout the course of your life, probably several folks, but who are some of the folks, or even one that might rise above the rest, that has had such an impact on your life that if you took them out of the equation, you wouldn't be the same Don that you are today. You wouldn't have the same success that you've had today.
Okay. The one that had the greatest and most long-term impact on my life was my mother. My mother, yes.
Yep.
My dad being career military, and we always joked with him about this, and he would get mad at us about it, but he wasn't home a lot because of his job in the Air Force. So Mom raised us.
Yeah.
And Mom was always there. Number one, she was the taskmaster. She taught us our discipline and responsibility and accountability and those kinds of things. But what she also showed me was that you can rise above where you are. My parents were not well-educated people. Neither of my parents completed high school. To their credit, myself and my siblings, all of us are college graduates, and all of us have graduate degrees. And we, by the way, all three of us put ourselves through school. So we didn't have Mom and Dad's money to do it because Mom and Dad didn't have any money to do it. But
no free lunch.
But had Mom not instilled that drive into us, we would not have accomplished that. When Mom could be brutal if you didn't dot your I's and cross your T's. We all joke to this day. We could always tell when we got a mom letter that was not good because there was something about you touched it and it was like your hands burned instantly. It was poison or something. But oh my gosh, I'm getting my rear end chewed in this letter. What did I do wrong? Because she held you accountable. If she wouldn't talk to you on the phone, you knew something was wrong, and maybe that was it. Then the letter came, and then you knew you were in trouble.
Yeah.
But it was those types of things that she did for us in developing those soft skills, if you will.
Yeah.
That I think made me into what I am. To a certain extent, ambition in control. She helped me realize dreams, even though they might have been the most ridiculous thing in the world. But she supported us. She didn't ridicule us because we had a dumb idea. And those kinds of. I think that she's had the greatest impact in that regard. Yeah. I had my own career in the military, so when I left with a different environment, when I left the service and went into the corporate world, I had a boss that was astute enough and caring enough to help me leave military behaviors behind. For example, I was always apparently, I wasn't aware I was doing this, but I was, doing visual inspections on how people were dressed. Was their shirt ironed? Did they shine their shoes? Those kinds of things. Was makeup crooked on the ladies? Those kinds of things. And I would notice those. And he taught me what was important and what isn't, and got me out of that type of a mindset. So and then taught me to be a little more politically astute. Because when in the military, contrary to what people think, that might be a general that you're talking to and you're just a sergeant, but he wants to really hear what you think. In the corporate world, that's not always true. And the general won't fire you. The corporate world, they will.
No.
So he had a big influence on teaching me those things. Because I literally went. I was a sergeant in the Army.
Yeah.
And I left the Army as a sergeant, and the next thing I know, I'm a vice president.
Yeah.
Huge change in environment, behaviors, all of those things. And he helped me navigate that. Yeah. And helped me really bring that together. Incidentally, that was also the same boss that we did the GED program with.
There you go.
So it was that was good for me.
The art of dealing with people, it's important.
Yeah.
And knowing are they above you, are they below you?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It reminds me of the rule of never outshining the master. There's a way in which in that old model of apprenticeship, as the parable goes, if the apprentice outshines the master, it usually won't go well for the apprentice, that type of thing. And it's interesting, but the level of detail, like you're saying, it can be taken in the wrong sense.
Yeah.
Maybe in the Army, but you have to also then, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio again. It's not the method, right?
Correct.
What does this look like in the corporate world? And realizing I don't have the right to say that to that person or the platform or the respect or the relationship or whatever it might be.
And one of the things that I did in my corporate career was that I mirrored or emulated those behaviors that I felt were the most positive. It's just don't be afraid to bring me a problem if you fail, because I'm not going to shoot the messenger. If you make a mistake, own up to it. Those kinds of things. If you know something that I don't, tell me. If you can do something I can't do, show me. And it worked very well for me. And in fact, there are quite a few people who I always use the expression "worked with," but to illustrate the point, they worked for me.
Yeah.
That I am good friends with today, and all have gone on to other careers and are doing quite well. And we don't get together and hoist one on occasion because we're all over the country, but we email and we text and things like that to this day. And I think some of that is just. It's indicative of the way that they were treated and the way we work together.
Yeah.
And I, just things that I picked up along the way that work quite well. And I try to do that with my clients.
Yeah.
Although sometimes one does have to bite their tongue. So.
Yeah. Or their tongue. Right?
Yeah, that might work too. Right?
Well, yeah, interesting. So I love what, going back to the influence your mother had on you. Just like you said, you can rise above where you are. I don't know what it is. It seems like you go talk to a 5-year-old and they're ready to take over the world. No 5-year-old wants to stay in their bedroom and they want to get out and play and conquer. And then you talk to a 25-year-old and they just hide in their bedrooms and they're on TikTok or their smartphone or playing video games. Or it seems like I'm just talking in generalizations. So you might be a 25-year-old that's listening to this. That's not like that. Totally cool. But it seems like somewhere along the way, between 5 and 25, we've lost the capacity to think big, or to think that we could actually rise above where we are. And I think that might be one of the greatest gifts that your mom gave you, was just to know that you can, as long as you're fogging a mirror, you can constantly be evolving, producing, becoming even greater. You're not dead yet, so how can you grow? How can you learn? How can you serve other people? Is that kind of what you took from that, or?
Yes, but it was to never discourage.
Yeah.
And one of the examples that I enjoy from my youth was my dad came back from Vietnam, and we were living in Florida at the time because my mom decided she didn't like snow.
Which part?
We were in the Melbourne, Cocoa Beach, Palm Bay area.
Okay.
And so my dad comes home, and in our yard, in the suburbs, but in our yard, we had a horse, we had chickens, we had ducks, we had rabbits, we had 3 dogs and a cat.
In Florida.
Yeah.
Palm trees.
And in our little 3-bedroom house that we were in while my dad was overseas. And it was, he hit the roof. What are you doing? And the chickens made their way to the freezer. Everything else got let go except for 2 dogs. But... it was Mom thought nothing of that. That's what we wanted as kids. And we weren't spoiled. I mean, these were not extravagant things. We weren't spoiled in that regard, but she let us enjoy life and have fun while doing it. And I think that was part of what she taught us. Don't discourage, encourage. And in the midst of all that, she'd take us to ball practice and the scouting, and would drop us off for weekend camping trips on the islands in the Indian River with our friends and things like that. And she never got in the way of our doing things. And if we wanted to do something that nobody knew how, she'd go out and find out, and then she'd help us do it. Cool. So it was huge, just huge.
A very wise mom in raising. How many siblings do you have?
I have a brother and a sister.
Brother and sister, raising the kids. Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. All right, so there's enough out there as far as good advice, and you've given, even amidst your failures, you've taught us a lot of what we should do. I'm curious, what's some of the worst advice that you're floating around these days? It seems like, with that technology is a double-edged sword, how it's really helped to level the playing field. Now it's made everyone an expert, right?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, some of the things that you hear floating around and conflicting information or opinions and all the ideas and all that kind of stuff. And so what's some just terrible advice you hear, or that you were maybe given some long?
Well, the worst advice that was ever given to me actually led to the elimination of my job at my last traditional job, which was the new owners came in and they wanted to do some things that were, they were just wrong. And in fact, they were blatantly against law. And it wasn't so much that they wanted to do them and we had to have the discussion about let's find another way. It was they came up to me and my entire department. There were 17 of us. And they came up to the department and they said, this is what we're going to do. And everybody looked at me because everybody knew, no, you can't do that. It just flat out can't do that. And I said, what is the goal? You don't understand. This is what you're going to do. And so every attempt to direct it to a practical solution wasn't happening. So this was the advice. Don, if you expect to be successful in working with us, you better learn how to break the law. And I will never forget those words as long as I live. They'll probably come out of my mouth on my deathbed. But and when when you're put in a very delicate position, because now I'm standing there with my team who looks to me for guidance, support, etc. And here I am standing with my bosses, and they're telling me that if I want to be successful, I'm going to break the law. So what do? Well, you have an ethical choice. You can say, yep, that's the way it'll be. We're going to go break the law. Or you can say, oh, no, we're not. And Don chose, I still say to this day, the right path. I said, we're not going to do that. Yeah. Exact words. Well, you're not going to be here very longer then. Just less than a week later, we were gone. So.
Yeah. Wow.
So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And even the boldness or audacity that you were approached. Crazy. Don't break the law.
Yes. The worst advice I've ever given somebody.
Yeah.
Oh gosh,
That's a
I've
great
given
question.
I've given some bad advice along the way, but I think the worst would probably involve my youngest son, he's still trying to find his way in the world. But he's doing well. I don't want to take anything away from him in that regard in case he hears this. But it's true. He's doing quite well. I'm very proud of it. But it's trying to give him career guidance. All of my sons, all three of them know that I was very big on military service. With my middle son's third generation career military. So that was always an option for all of them. But I never jammed it down their throat. It was always, what do you like to do? Let's try to help you. But my youngest he's not a student. It's not what he does. He's a hands-on kind of guy. And I did. I tried to push him into more of an academic environment because I just didn't pay attention to the other. And he's a CNC operator now. He's happier than a pig in slop, and he just got another promotion at work. So he's doing quite well.
Awesome. But
But I could have very easily tried to push him down a path and I guess I was. And so that career advice was not the best.
yeah.
It's fortunately we're still pretty good friends. So it's better be. We're going to be spending about 20 hours in a car together here at the end of April. So it's
So the bad advice that you gave, which is actually made me think maybe that's a question I need to ask. On the show moving forward is not just what's the worst advice you've heard, but what's the worst advice you've given.
Yeah,
that's a great question.
It was the advice I think we're trying to give everybody today. There's nothing wrong with going out and learning a trade.
Right.
But I was pushing him into the academics.
Right.
Go get the bachelor's degree, not the trade. And he went and got the trade.
Right.
And you know what? He's a heck of a lot secure than many people. He's making a darn good wage, and ask me how much student debt he has. It's called none.
Right.
It was, I guess, letting your personal biases get in the way.
Yeah.
And,
well, even from a market perspective, I mean, it's a great time to get into the trades.
Yeah. Yes.
And really, if someone was entrepreneurial in that, could eventually parlay it into a business for themselves. Just with how many folks are coming out of the trades,
Right.
and then the gap there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you gave actually good parental advice too. It's really knowing your kids. What are they good at? What are they not good at? And then what do they enjoy? What do they not enjoy? And then where are the economic opportunities and where aren't they?
Right.
And if we pay attention and be students of our own kids, we can start to learn and pick up on those things and then shepherd them in a helpful direction. If we just ignore those things and we think, what's the best thing for my son, or whatever it is, and we say, well, it's almost like we would project on them like what
Right.
ourselves would do. And you're saying that let's not do that. Let's just pay attention to who they are, what they enjoy, what they're good at. Let's find ways that they could different paths that they could choose to go on that way.
That advice that we're all aware of that we forget. Find something that you enjoy doing, and you'll never have a bad day again, or words to that effect. It's just.
I heard a few weeks back. I watched a documentary with Warren Buffett, and he said something like, find the job that you would do if you didn't need one. And I think it comes down to what are you good at? Because no one loves just doing something that they're terrible at. And it doesn't mean that you don't have room to grow or you're the expert at it, but find something you're good at. Find work that you enjoy doing. You might be good at it, but it might be miserable, and that's not going to be a great long-term path.
Well, I'm really excited to share with you that What Not to Do has been gaining traction and momentum and experiencing some early wins, which is super exciting, and reminded me this show is about you, it's for you, and I couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. If you're part of a company, if you own a company, and you think your message would be really, really relevant and valuable to the folks that are part of this community, entrepreneurs, leaders, public figures, and those aspiring as such, reach out to me. My contact info is in the show notes, and we can sit down and consider what it would look like to partner together in equipping the world for success.
Buffett's an interesting guy anyway. I had the pleasure of meeting him.
Yeah,
and
tell us about that.
It was when I was living in Omaha.
Yeah.
And he used to go to the Dairy Queen just down from where his house is. The house that is the only house he's ever owned, from what I understand. He bought it when he was in his 20s or something.
Yeah.
But he would walk down there, and he'd get him some type of a Sunday, and then he would sit in the same booth every day, every week, whatever it was, and enjoy that. And I was just happened to be there that time, and somebody said, "That's Warren Buffett." Well, me being me, I walked over and introduced myself. And very personal. He could have blown me off, and with incredibly personal. Asked us to sit down, and so we sat down and we just chatted for a while. Yeah. And it was just we talked about stuff, and nothing. Isn't Omaha great? Where did I come from? It's what do we do? Who do we work for? And we worked for a well-known employer in the Omaha area, so everybody knew who we were, but who the business was, not necessarily who we were. But So, but it was a fun experience. So
it's refreshing to see guys that, and maybe even the path that Warren Buffett has taken. It doesn't seem like he tries to be the celebrity, right?
Mm-hmm. No, he's very low key.
Never moved East Coast, just stayed there, and you said just some of the habits that he in the documentary. Yeah. It said that he went to, and it was him talking. He goes to McDonald's every morning in the drive-thru, and his wife will set out a certain amount of change, and there's 3 different amounts of change depending on how the stock market's doing. So if the stock market's doing well, it's the highest amount, it's like $1 or something. If it's not doing well, it's the lowest amount, it might be like 80 cents. I forget, it was something like that, and she would just leave it out on the counter, and he would take it and then go. You see these kind of just very. It just reminds you that everyone's human. They're flesh and blood. They're people, right? And so sometimes we get starstruck with like the celebrity status and this billionaire, but here he is enjoying a Sunday at Dairy Queen and approachable and enjoyable.
And I think that's the case with him. It's I've had an enjoyable life and have been exposed to a lot of high profile people. Yeah. And he was without doubt the most human, most normal. So it's
love it, very cool. All right, so it's rush hour in every major city in the world, from Omaha to Little Chute, because we got crazy traffic in Little Chute, right?
Oh yeah, I'm watching it here. 2 cars,
tumbleweed running all the way to Hong Kong, and everyone's listening to this episode of Don Herrmann on what not to do, and once you know it, they look up out of their car window and they see a billboard. And it's Don's billboard. What are the chances? Yeah. What's the message that they see? What message, Don, do you want the world to see? Well,
the comedian in Don just thought of, "Hi, I'm Don Herrmann, and you're not." And if you get the Saturday Night Live reference from Chevy Chase's days, then you get it. But I'm not that self-promoting. That's a hard question. Gosh, you've really put me on the spot with that one, because I honestly don't know. People say, and I'm going to borrow words from other people now, people say that Don is a great asset. People say that Don is incredibly helpful, that he knows business. Some people say Don's a jerk. I mean, it's... so my billboard would not say, "Hi, this is Don Herrmann, he's a jerk," I can assure you of that. But I would, it'd probably be, if you need help with what you're doing, ask Don, or words to that, something along those lines. I mean, it's just, my head don't work that way. I don't know. I don't know. It's just,
so do you have in mind, like, that's what you'd want, like, for your business, or just personal, or just
well, life in general? It would be either way. I mean, it's just, people have always said I'm very easy to talk to. Yeah. And
I found it very difficult, actually.
Although I'm not surprised. Anecdotally, I remember when I was married, women that my wife worked with would come to me and tell me things that they would not tell the other women that they worked with. And then because you got to tell your wife what the heck you were talking to that woman about. You'd say something like, "Oh, she's pregnant. She hasn't told her boss or told her husband yet." I didn't even know that. What's she doing telling you those kinds of things? So people have always found me easy to talk to and share those things. So in that regard, I mean, if you need help with something, I'm not a psychologist or a counselor, but if you just need somebody to bounce something off of, or you got to clear your head with it, or find a better or a different way to say things, then in that regard, yes. Yeah. But more than likely, it would be something with your professional life. So, yeah.
It's awesome. If you need help, ask Don.
Yeah,
that's great. And we will we'll have Don's contact in the show notes. That way, if you want to reach out to Don, grab coffee with him, do business with him, make a new friend, whatever it might be. Yeah. You can.
I do a lot of that.
So actually, that'd be kind of a fun fun YouTube series or videos. Ask Don.
Yeah.
Right?
What's better than Dear Abby? And I've had that label too. So it's
all right. Bonus round. You're a voracious reader. We're kindred spirits there. So I know it's unfair to ask you to rank your top 3 books, but I think it's probably within reason to say, hey, what are 3 books that you think are really, really impactful that people should read sooner than later, that their lives might suffer the longer that they put these off?
Well, yeah, the bulk of my reading is history.
Okay.
Well, I'm a history nut like you would not believe.
A certain time period? Or?
All U.S. history, but all over. The most recent book I read was The History of Andrew Jackson.
Yep.
The one before that, U.S. history. Remember I said that was about the history of Winston Churchill. So
there you go.
But I do read a lot of history in that regard. Pleasure reading is more action adventure type books. I'm reading the Mitch Rapp series right now, and I forget the author's name off the top of my head, but. Many people might know it by the movie came out a couple of years ago, American Assassin. But he's a CIA operative. Those spy novels that aren't James Bond.
Yeah.
But business books, I've got quite a few, and they're everything from workbooks and toolkits and those kinds of things. But there are 3 that I find I use a lot, and they were the ideas for them came to me from different people.
Yeah.
The first one is the 4 disciplines of execution. I'm a huge believer in you have to execute. If you don't execute, you have nothing. Yeah. And statistics will show that most businesses do not execute their plans. They're very good at planning, but they don't execute. So that's one. And that suggestion for that book came from a friend of mine who's a financial advisor. Okay. Another one is Leading Out Loud. And that's about communicating your vision and your mission on the part of the leader, but also managing and affecting change management within the organization.
Who's the author?
The author on that one is Terry Pierce. And I actually wrote these down for you so you can have this.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And that one came to me when I did my very first consulting assignment. And it was a book that had been recommended by, of all people, Joe Ricketts, who was the founder of the Ameritrade piece of TD Ameritrade.
Okay.
And he said he really liked the book and that he wanted it to fit into their development program, so we did that. Okay. And then this last one came from a client. And the name of the book is Payoff, and the author is Dan Ariely. And it's about motivation, it is trying to give an alternative to motivation that doesn't follow the stereotypical motivational theories of Maslow and Hertzberger and those kinds of people. It gets more into what motivates you viscerally and why and what you're looking to get out of what you're trying to do. So it's as much a why as it is the reward of doing what you want to do. And I just finished reading that one. These are books that I have found to be very valuable to me in what I do. Because they give me a different perspective on what I do, give me a different set of words to explain or help explain to people why they need to do certain things or why they should do certain things, when I'm not trying to get them to say the same words themselves, the coaching side of what I do.
Yeah.
And so I found these 3 quite good, quite good. So it's a...
The note on Payoff, I had a light bulb go off in me. You mentioned Maslow and et cetera. And I'm assuming are you referencing incentivizing behavior and rewards?
Yes,
exactly.
and I was actually doing a compensation program for this organization, and he wanted me to read this book so I'd understand how the organization's thoughts were toward doing this. Apparently, and I have not watched it, but apparently Dan Ariely, the author, has a TED Talk that he does on this book and the principles of that book.
Yeah, interesting. And it's fascinating because it reminds me of Start With Why by Simon Sinek. He talks about how we make decisions with our limbic brain, which is the more emotional, or what we would call the gut. And then that's wrapped with the cortex, which is the rational piece, right? So we filter those things through. But so he draws out business cases for companies that appeal to the visceral over against the rational, as far as why, like, so for instance, Apple versus Microsoft. And he tells a story. I'm reading through his Infinite Mindset or Infinite Game right now, where he, a contrast where
I believe I have Infinite Mindset or something similar to that on my bookshelf. So I just haven't read it. So it's like,
and then so Simic he's building off of that. He talks about how he did an event for Microsoft back in like when the iPod first came out, and Microsoft's conference was all about how they're going to beat Apple, right? And then he did a same a couple months later did a conference for Apple, and they're all about how they were going to help students or help teachers to better help students, right? And you can see the completely different focus of the companies, and even for like when you have an Apple guy, like he's generally there, it's a cult following, and Steve Jobs did a great job of casting that vision or inspiring folks to something greater, to take the power that the corporations had once upon a time and put it in your pocket,
right?
And that was an appeal to the visceral, or a very commonplace way to say it is you win the heart before the head. When you're talking about this book, Payoff, which I'm going to go get, I'm really curious to hear what he has to say about that, like, as far as what it looks like when you, instead of just like a mere like reinforcing a behavior or incentivizing behavior, appealing to the visceral in life in general, and how that would, not only from a company to a customer, but personally, as we're charting out a course in life, not to ignore the gut, the visceral. Right. It's a feature, not a bug type of thing. Cool. Yep. Good, fun. Okay. Don, people are going to want to get in touch with you. They're going to want to get to know you. They're going to want to sample your food and make sure that it's okay and that you're not...
I promise no food poisoning.
Or maybe teach you fly fishing or do business with you. So where can they find you? How can they connect with you?
Well, you can always connect me through my website, HerrmannAdvantageConsulting.com. And Herrmann is spelled differently, HERRMANN, AdvantageConsulting.com. You can learn a little bit more about me there. Look at there's some case studies in there. Look at some things and that. But there's a contact page. You can contact me that way.
Have your email or phone there.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. You can call me 920-415-0392. That's an answering service, and because otherwise my phone would never stop ringing. And it goes to a voicemail. You can leave a message there, and I'll call you back. At which point, then you get my real phone number.
Right.
But with all the spam calls and everything, I had to get that set up because, oh my gosh, the phone never stopped. And I don't know if you've heard it, but this thing has dinged about 27 times since we've been sitting here. And I've got the volume turned off, and we still heard it ding. But those
Lenovo, right?
Yeah. But those are the best ways to reach out to me, and most people it's through the website and the contact page there.
Yeah.
So
and you're on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn. Yes.
Is that a great way to?
That too. And so if I generally only connect with the folks that are within North America, basically, because I don't work offshore, and there's limited value there for both of us.
Yeah.
I'll accept an invite from most anybody.
Cool.
And then I'm on LinkedIn daily because it's either a coaching hack that I share, or I was blogging quite regularly. We've kind of toned those down. People don't read as much as they used to, so it's the little blurbs, the quick shots tend to work pretty good. So you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So.
That's good, great. And I'm going to stop on a tangent where little Johnny Cash just came out. I'm a big fan. Love this song. Guys, I'll cut you down. I'm a musician, and I'll cover this song when I play out. It's fun. Just on the acoustic guitar, so it's good stuff. Cool, fun. Okay, great. Awesome. Don, this has been amazing. I learned so much just talking with you.
Well, thank you.
I love the stories, and it's really cool because when we do these conversations, there could be one piece that you said that you might not even have thought twice of. And it could have just changed the course of somebody's life for the better, which is really, really cool. I think as I'm kind of looking through and thinking back, I think there's quite a bit in here that really could have impacted someone. You might never see the fruit of that. They might never reach out to you.
And that's fine.
But how cool is that?
Yeah.
Right? And so thank you so much for being on the show and
You're very
sitting
welcome.
down with me. So awesome.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, great conversation with Don. Let's recap what Don told us not to do. First, don't be an angel. Don't be an angel. Have a devil in the room. You need a devil's advocate, someone who's willing to flip the script, turn the tables, to really kind of push back against the idea. This kind of goes in line with what he was saying. If everyone is thinking the same thing, then no one is thinking, right? It's the saying, if everyone is special, then no one is special, right? If everybody is thinking the same thing no one is thinking. So get someone who's willing to differ, to disagree, and wrestle with that, to really know that your idea, whatever it might be, is really proven, really thought out well. Secondly, don't lose compassion. Don't lose compassion. And along with this, don't let consequences cloud your judgment. In the story with his boss had every right to be super upset, and yet it was extremely compassionate and merciful, really helpful. And he also exercised an incredible amount of discipline to not let the consequences of the situation and the major failure cloud his judgment, to A, be compassionate, and then B, how to think through the best course of action moving forward, right? And so those things are really important, not easy. Don't lose compassion, and don't let the consequences of whatever situation get in the way of your judgment, of clouding your good judgment. Last but not least, don't discourage. That can be a really tough one, to not discourage. And we think, well, no, it's easy. But when was the last time that you actually made a practice of building someone up, of actually encouraging them to flip that? So often in life we want to, maybe because we think we're helping, just to say, hey, this is what you did wrong, right? And then just leave it at that. Well, that can really have a suffocating effect. It can actually work against us in trying to bring about the results that we want. We can be shooting ourselves in the foot. And so not the greatest way. We want, like Don's mom, to say, you can rise above where you are. If you're still fogging a mirror, you can rise above where you are. It's not too late. So, where are you? Are you still fogging a mirror? You're listening to this, so you must be. I want you to hear that. What an awesome takeaway from the conversation with Don. You can rise above where you are. And that's so exciting. It's not over. Whether or not you feel lonely, you feel beat down, especially in the time where we're facing, the international crisis with the coronavirus, and however that's impacted you, I want you to know you can rise above that. It's not over. You can rise above where you are. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe you don't have income at all. Maybe you're fine and well, right? Maybe you've got kids you're caring for. Whatever the situation might be, I want you to know that there's absolute hope, and you can rise above where you are. You can beat this thing. You can figure it out. We can do that together. So thank you so much for listening. This podcast is about you. It's for you. I couldn't do it without you. If you've been helped by this, encouraged, impacted, share it with somebody else. I'm on a mission to inspire 1 billion people to live a legacy worth leaving, and I'm so excited that you're joining me in that mission. It means so much to me. So let's do it. If you are someone who thinks you should be on the show, you're an entrepreneur, you're a leader, you're a public figure, and that has had successes, but willing to lean into some failures to help equip others for success, hey, reach out to me. Would love to hear your story. Or if you know someone that would fit that bill, connect us. That'd be really great. Introduce us, and we'll go from there. If your company and you think you've got a really powerful story that you'd like to get in front of the folks here, entrepreneurs, leaders, and public figures, and aspiring such, let's sit down, let's figure that out. Let's see what a partnership might look like and how we can best tell your story. Well, it's been said that good men learn from their own mistakes, but great men, they learn from the mistakes of others. So go and be great. We'll see you next time.